It has been a long while since a Disney song was able to take up so much real estate in my brain, especially to the point where I have to play the soundtrack to get it out of my wife's head, lest I hear the opening line of
We don't talk about Bruno.
and only the opening line of
We don't talk about Bruno!
for the 100th time in 5 minutes.
Hey, Bruno, shut it down, would you please?
Ignoring my descent into madness, Encanto has madrigal choired its way into our hearts, what with the beautiful animation, magical mystery, and touching story of overcoming intergenerational trauma. What if you kept the themes, the beautiful animation, and the magical realism, but wanted to up the maturity level to that of a YA novel and shift the setting to modern Japan? You might lose some of the musical numbers unless Lin-Manuel needs another project, but I think it's a fair trade and a bad transition to Natsuki Takaya's Fruits Basket. Published between 1998 and 2006, Fruits Basket first appeared semi-monthly in the magazine Hana to Yume. I've been following the series stateside since about 2004, having purchased the English comics way back then from publisher Tokyopop. In fact, Fruits Basket was one of Tokyopop's best-selling series, with Volume 16 ranking on USA Today's top 150 weekly best-selling books.
Wow.
The story begins with a tragedy. Toru Honda's mother has recently passed away in an auto accident. Her father has long since passed, and not wanting to burden her grandfather or friends, Toru decides to tough it out in the woods until she graduates high school. Except the woods she's trying to Bear Grylls it in belong to the family of her classmate, the handsome, popular Yuki Soma. Yuki's older cousin, Shigure, owns their nearby home and insists that she stay in his house until a more permanent plan can be made. While unpacking, a third Soma appears to pick a fight with Yuki, and during the squabble we discover the Soma family is under a curse. The effects of which I won't spoil, but a hint would be that the director of Disney's Turning Red, Domi Shi, drew direct inspiration from Fruits Basket, per her interview with Polygon. That poofy mist ought to look pretty familiar. As the story progresses, we begin to see how the curse has affected each member of the Soma family, all the way up to the family head, Akito. Honestly, the biggest draw to the story is unraveling the mystery of the Soma family curse, its origin, its influence, all the while getting to know each and every one of the cursed individuals for who they are. Despite the gravity of this exposition, the series is overall a dramatic comedy. Don't get me wrong, we've got the typical love triangles, tons of winsome, furtive glances. I mean, come on, how many Timothée Chalamet knockoffs can one family make? Thirst traps aside, we also have gems like these.
Here.
Before we get into the more serious elements of the anime, we need a quick primer on the history of magical realism. The definition is in the name. It's magic, but in a realistic setting or view. Pinning down what is and isn't magical realism can be a tricky business. As an example, Sir Terry Pratchett, author of Good Omens, the Discworld series, and more, is quoted for having refused to say he wrote magical realism because it is like a polite way of saying you write fantasy that is more acceptable to certain people. Through that lens, stories like Harry Potter, the X-Men, and the cult classic Pushing Daisies could all be forms of magical realism. With Encanto, it's through Abuela's loss that the miracle was born. Through real trauma, magic comes to life. In Fruits Basket, it's the inverse. Magic leads to real trauma. To avoid any spoilers regarding the Soma curse, I will simply state that the curse affects 14 members of the family at a time, and has done so for centuries. 13 of those members experience the curse through intimate contact from a member of the opposite sex. No, yes, that too, but a simple hug suffices. They also have a compulsory bond to the family head and 14th cursed one, Akito. I want you to imagine that for a moment. Think about how you might have been affected if you were unable to hug your mother or father. How any romantic or sexual encounter would effectively be impossible because the slightest misstep could result in your curse being revealed to a world that is unaware of magic. This is where Toru is the catalyst for change in the Soma family. She finds out about the curse and, after some realistic shock to witnessing real magic, embraces it. Remind you of somebody else? There are two places where Fruits Basket surpasses Encanto in regards to handling familial trauma. The first is that you don't have to have magical powers to have problems. Toru's remaining family are all terrible. When they find out she's living with the men of the Soma family, they all imply she's become a sex worker. Everyone except Grandpa. Grandpa is old school cool. But Toru isn't alone in having an imperfect family. Her friend Arisa is a former gang member and has an alcoholic father. Later in the series, we meet two half-siblings, unrelated to the Soma family, that are pitted against one another by their mothers in order to win their father's inheritance. The best representation of a solid family is Hanajima, a girl with loving parents, a strong relationship with her little brother, and, allegedly, occult powers. Which leads to my second point. Fruits Basket is about growth, change, and finding those people that accept you and make you better. Let's chat about that title. It's a game that children play, like a mix of Red Rover and musical chairs. Kids are assigned the name of a fruit, and when their fruit is called, they join the basket. Toru as a child was always called Rice Ball. In case you didn't pay attention in home economics, that's not a fruit. Then again, pizza's a vegetable, so what do I know? Toru, Arisa, Hanajima, the Somas. They are all considered other and have felt like they didn't belong in the Fruits Basket. But throughout the story, they find one another and choose to make their own basket, their own chosen family. I appreciate in Encanto that the family was able to unite and welcome back the estranged Bruno to their rebuilt home. That Abuela was able to realize how her actions had affected her children and her grandchildren. But based on my experience with reality, that's probably the most magical part of the story. Many of the members of the Soma family want nothing more than their freedom from the curse, to live away from the family estate, to pursue careers and to love people of their choosing. Many of them have dealt with the bitter sting of familial disapproval, or outright denial. It's here Fruits Basket truly leans into realism. In our three-dimensional lives, these adverse childhood experiences can have lasting effects well into adulthood. Adverse childhood experience, or ACE, is a technical term. I first heard about it on Dak Shepard's podcast, Armchair Expert, with guest Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. Here's an example question from an ACE quiz via NPR. Did a parent or other adult in the household often insult you,
brazen, stupid,
put you down,
you're a monster, Kyo, a freak,
or humiliate you?
Why are you asking? To get to know me?
Act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt. And that's Akito doing everything from question 1 of 10. So why do these experiences matter? Research shows that people with a high ACE score are more likely to have issues with substance abuse, mental health. They can have difficulty forming healthy and stable relationships. How might these individuals behave? Oh, they could try to fix everything, pursue perfectionism over themselves, stoically serve their family, ignoring their own needs, become distant and feel unappreciated, have mood swings, insert themselves or become inserted due to hearing things they shouldn't, or, in the case of this guy, I can personally tell you. Until I was 16 years old, I was very short. Sports, especially basketball, are a key communal activity where I grew up, and the IT crowd pretty well sums up how I feel about them.
Ray, he's kicked the ball.
In general, I was, and probably still am, very weird. I was bullied a lot, and the strategy that finally got people to leave me alone was overt and acute aggression. Around Kyo's age, I started to discover that being on guard all the time is exhausting.
Bruh.
It took me another several years, some good and gracious friends, and a few well-deserved thumps around the head and shoulders to drop the majority of that nonsense. But I still identify and understand Kyo's struggle to be vulnerable in a world that has largely rejected him for it. Enough feelings. At this rate, I'll be the one making the winsome, furtive glances. If you somehow avoided to talk about Bruno and want to know what the hubbub is about, you can watch Encanto on Disney+. If the Somas have entranced you, you can watch all 3 seasons of Fruits Basket on Crunchyroll. Seriously, so winsome.